I've talked about cozy games before and how I think cozy games is like kind of developing its own like school of design, where like there's enough of them being made now that you can like kind of pick out good examples and bad examples from cozy games and like what works and what doesn't work. If this game was actually made in 4 months, that is like genuinely really crazy. I think it's very easy to get the design wrong with cozy games. I think it's easier to get it wrong than people think. What would you say are some benchmarks? I think any game can be quote unquote cozy. I might be kind of alone in this thought, but I think that like when I say that any game can be potentially cozy, there are a lot of games that are considered very stressful and violent that I consider cozy. Like there are parts of Escape from Tarkov that I find really cozy. A lot of guys running around. I'm in a mall right now in the game. Are you gonna play a game today? There are parts of the original like S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl that I find really cozy. There's yeah, Dark Souls can be really cozy too. And I was like, hey, do you guys like, are we gonna do crimes? Like, are we gonna do anything bad? And they were just like, no, I'm not into that. No, we're not criminals. And I was like, oh, okay. And inside I was like, this is so fucking cool. And I think I think making something really cozy means that it's focusing on one part of the game loop, which is the part where like the action is low and you're giving players a break. When that part is good, then I think that's when like the coziness of a game can like really shine. Everybody knows in a game, this is like time, and let's say that the x-axis is time and the y-axis is difficulty. Ideally, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have like this. A lot of people initially might think that over time you want to crank up the difficulty up and up and up, but you don't want to do that because it's gonna be like really stressful like around here. If you're just constantly like ratcheting up the difficulty, the way you want to like ideally have this is like for a linear game too, you want the like difficulty to like be in waves. So you want the difficulty to like ramp up, and then you kind of have some time to rest, and then you ramp up the difficulty a little bit, and then you rest, and then maybe you have like smaller bumps, and then maybe, oh, you got like a really big one. And then like, this is just like good. This is like how you pace a game. What I would consider what makes a cozy game is during like these parts. If you can make these parts really compelling, that is what is gonna make your game cozy. And this is time when you're like not actively fighting a boss and not like really like intense in a game. This is when you're like resting and you're like just exploring the world. And it'll be like really passive things. It could be as simple as like going through like an Escape from Tarkov. I thought it was really cozy just like organizing my inventory or just like being in my little hideout. Or like even like during a match in Escape from Tarkov, there were a lot of down times where like there was just no action and you were like just walking around, and the forest or like wherever you were was like really peaceful and serene. So this to me is like what makes a cozy game, is focusing on these parts. The problem is that like I guess some people, like what can happen is you can make a game about like, let's say you make a game about gardening and you're like, my game is gonna be, you know, it's about gardening and flowers and stuff. And oh, it's gonna be cozy for sure, right? Well, if let's say you're making this and there's no stakes, it doesn't really matter if your plants and stuff grow or not. Talking to people isn't really interesting. Then you're just like, there's no difficulty, and it's like this. But if there's nothing if there's nothing compelling about this, then it's gonna be like, well, how do I say this? If this isn't good, then your cozy game is not gonna be fun. And the problem is like, when you have like low stakes in a game, you have to make this entire low point really interesting, which is very difficult. But let's say you have a gardening game and like, there's little bits of like intense times, and then there's like down times where like maybe you talk to people and the people are actually cool. And then, oh, it ramps up, like something happens, there's a drought, and maybe you like worked with the people that you met down here. And then during these low points, you're like, oh, you're talking to everybody and they're like, oh, thank God we made it out of that drought. Then that makes it like a cool, fun, cozy game. So, I mean, also, this is like one way of doing it. With the game design, there's no like single way of doing anything. But there are ways that are like kind of more, I guess, interesting or more sort of proven than others. A huge guppy? That might be the smallest fish I've ever gotten.